My sister scheduled her baby shower on my wedding day to steal the spotlight. My parents went to her event instead of supporting me, but when she showed up at my reception, I confronted her in front of everyone and destroyed her marriage. I'm 25 years old. I work as an animator for a pretty well-known studio. And 3 months ago, I married the love of my life in what should have been the happiest day of my existence. But my older sister, Arabella, literally tried to sabotage it by planning her baby shower on the same day and at the same time as my wedding, and when that didn't work, she showed up at the reception to make a scene so big that I still can't believe it happened. I guess I should start from the beginning for this to make sense. Because the truth is, this story doesn't start on my wedding day, but rather it goes back as far as I can remember. From when I was a little girl watching my parents treat Arabella like she was the reincarnation of perfection, while I was basically invisible. Arabella is 5 years older than me, and from the moment I was born, I think my parents had already decided who their favorite was. You know, she was the first. The one who did everything right, the one who got good grades without trying, the one who had millions of friends, the one who was pretty and charismatic and everything a daughter is supposed to be. I, on the other hand, was the second, the quiet one, the weird one who preferred to draw in her room instead of going out with people. And it didn't matter what I did, because I was never going to measure up to my perfect sister. I remember when I was like 8 years old, maybe 9, and I won a statewide drawing competition, something super important to me at the time. And my parents went to the award ceremony but spent the whole time talking about how Arabella had just been elected debate team captain at her school. And when I went up on stage to receive my award, my mother was literally sending messages on her phone. That kind of thing happened constantly. Like, I could bring home a perfect 10 and my parents would say, "Oh, that's nice, honey." But if Arabella brought home a 9, it was because the teacher was unfair and she deserved better. Things got worse. In middle school and high school, when I started to develop my own style and my own interests that had nothing to do with what my parents considered appropriate or successful, I got really into digital art, started making short animations on my computer, spent hours and hours perfecting my technique. But to my parents, it was just a weird phase I was going to grow out of. Meanwhile, Arabella was in college studying business administration, dating guys from important families, being the daughter any parent would dream of having. My parents went to all her events, all her presentations, paid for everything, literally everything, from her apartment to her car. And when I asked for help buying a decent graphics tablet to improve my work, they told me money didn't grow on trees and that I should get a part-time job if I wanted things like that. The ironic thing is, I did get that job. I worked at a coffee shop throughout high school while keeping up with my studies and my art, and when I was finally able to buy my own tablet and my own upgraded computer with my own money, my parents didn't even notice. My Aunt Rachel, my mom's sister, was the only person in the whole family who saw what was happening and wasn't afraid to say it out loud. I remember perfectly one Christmas. I must have been like 16. When we were all gathered at my parents' house and my dad wouldn't stop talking about how Arabella had gotten an amazing internship at a prestigious company, and I casually mentioned that I had won another digital animation contest and that my work was going to be exhibited at a local gallery, and my dad literally said, how interesting, and kept talking about Arabella. Aunt Rachel interrupted him and said, "Wait a minute, your daughter just told you something important and you didn't even pay attention?" And my dad got all defensive, saying that of course he paid attention to me, but that Arabella's internship was a very significant achievement. And Aunt Rachel just looked at him and said, "Both daughters' achievements should be equally important to you, but clearly they're not." A terrible drama ensued. My mom defended my dad. Arabella acted like she was a victim somehow, and I just wanted to disappear. But that night, Aunt Rachel came to my room and told me to never let anyone make me feel less than what I was, that my parents were wrong and that someday I was going to shine so bright they wouldn't be able to ignore me. When I started college, I went as far away as I could, got a full scholarship to an art school in another state, and basically cut contact with my family to a minimum level. Like, I called once a month, went home for Christmas, and that was it. Nothing more. My parents barely noticed my absence. They were too busy celebrating that Arabella had gotten engaged to Brandon, a guy from a well-off family who worked in finance or something like that, and planning her perfect wedding, that of course they paid for completely. We're talking about a wedding that cost like $70,000 with 300 guests, and the whole circus. I went to that wedding, stayed quiet in a corner, and left as soon as I could without anyone really noticing my departure. During the following years, I focused completely on my career. I graduated with honors, got an amazing job at an animation studio that does projects for major streaming services, and started making my own money. Pretty good money, actually, but my parents never asked about my work or my life. They only called occasionally to tell me about Arabella and her kids, because, oh yes, Arabella had 3 kids in 5 years, and each pregnancy was treated like the second coming of Christ by my parents. About 2 years ago, I met Ethan at an animation convention. He's a video game designer, he's 29 years old, and from the first moment, we connected in a way I had never experienced with anyone. He's kind, genuinely interested in what I do, supports me in everything, makes me laugh, and, most importantly, he sees me. Really sees me as a person, not as someone else's defective younger sister. We got engaged after a year of dating, and honestly, I wasn't planning on having a big wedding. Like, I was thinking something small on the beach with close friends, and that's it. But Ethan wanted to celebrate, wanted us to have that special day, and Aunt Rachel offered to help financially because she knew my parents weren't going to cooperate. We decided to do a medium-sized wedding, like 150 people. Nothing extravagant but nice. We booked a beautiful venue overlooking the lake, hired a photographer, a DJ, decent catering, the things a wedding normally has, and we sent out save the dates with 8 months of advance notice. I mean, no one could say they didn't have enough warning. This is where things get interesting, or rather, where the real drama of this story begins. Turns out about a year and a half ago, my mom had a pretty serious health scare. Like, they thought it might be cancer, but in the end it was something less serious, although it still required treatment. And during that time, she tried to reconnect with me. I guess facing mortality made her reflect on her priorities or something like that. I, like the idiot I sometimes am, let my guard down, started talking to her more often, visited her when I went to my hometown, even included her in some aspects of wedding planning. My dad never tried to reach out. He was still the same as always, distant and clearly more interested in Arabella. But my mom was making an effort, and I wanted to believe things could get better. Arabella, for her part, was pregnant with her 4th child, and obviously that pregnancy was the most important thing that had happened in human history according to my parents. About 6 months before my wedding, Arabella announced she was going to have a baby shower, and that she was super excited because this was her last baby, and she wanted to do something special. Normal, right? I congratulated my sister, asked her when it was going to be to make sure I could attend if it fell on a date that worked for me, and she said she hadn't decided on the exact date yet but would let me know. Weeks passed, months passed, I continued with wedding planning, sent updates to the family, and everything seemed to be going well. My wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in October. A perfect date, not too hot or too cold. The fall colors were going to be beautiful. Everything was turning out exactly as we had planned. 2 weeks before my wedding, 2 weeks, I get a call from my cousin Lena, Aunt Rachel's daughter, who, by the way, was going to be one of my bridesmaids, and she sounded urgent and upset at the same time. She tells me, "Cousin, I need to tell you something and you're not going to like it." And I'm thinking someone had died or something, so I tell her what happened. And she drops. Arabella just sent out the formal invitations for her baby shower, and she scheduled the event for the same day as your wedding, at the exact same time. I literally stayed silent for like 10 seconds processing what I had just heard, because it couldn't be real. It couldn't be that my sister had done that on purpose. It had to be a mistake, confusion, something. I asked Lena if she was sure, and she said yes, that the invitation was very clear. Same Saturday, same start time, and that apparently the invitations had been sent only to family, specifically to the same people who were invited to my wedding. I couldn't breathe properly. I literally felt like I was going to have a panic attack, because this wasn't a coincidence. There was no way it was a coincidence when she knew perfectly well when my wedding was. When we had talked about it multiple times. When the date had been public on our wedding website for months. I called Arabella immediately. My hands were shaking as I dialed. And when she answered with her all sweet and cheerful voice, I said, without any preamble, "Why did you schedule your baby shower on the same day as my wedding?" And she, with the biggest audacity in the world, acted surprised and said, "What? No, that can't be. There must be a mistake. Let me check." And I could clearly hear she wasn't checking anything. She was just buying time. And after a few seconds, she said, "Oh, wow. Yes, it is the same day. What bad luck. But I already sent the invitations and paid the deposit for the venue, so I can't change the date. You're going to have to understand. That I was going to have to understand? I exploded. Told her she knew perfectly well when my wedding was, that this was obviously intentional. How could she be so selfish and malicious? And she started crying, which is what she always does when confronted, and said I was being dramatic, that she hadn't done anything wrong, that it was her baby shower and her last baby and she had the right to celebrate it however she wanted, and that if I was so insecure I couldn't handle there being another event on the same day, then that was my problem, not hers. I hung up before saying something I would regret. Well, more than I had already said, and immediately called my mom. My mom already knew. Of course she knew. And when I asked her how she had allowed this to happen, she said, Arabella was very stressed with the pregnancy, and that it hadn't been intentional, and that surely we could find a solution where everyone was happy. I told her the only solution was for Arabella to change the date of her baby shower, because my wedding had been scheduled first, and with plenty of notice, and my mom sighed and said that wasn't going to happen because Arabella had already paid deposits, and that the family would have to decide which event to attend. Ethan was furious when I told him. He had never really met my extended family because I kept them at a distance. But he knew the whole story of my childhood and the toxic family dynamics, and he said this was the last straw. That we couldn't let Arabella get away with it, that we had to do something. Aunt Rachel was also furious. She confronted my mom and dad, told them what Arabella had done was unforgivable, and they should force her to change the date. But my dad came out with they couldn't force Arabella to do anything, and I was overreacting as always. Which, wow. Thanks, Dad, for basically confirming I'm never going to be important to you. I spent the next few days in a horrible state of anxiety, couldn't concentrate on work, barely slept, was having nightmares about my empty wedding with no one from my family, and Ethan had to constantly remind me that our friends were going to be there, that his family was going to be there, that that was what mattered. Zara, my best friend since college and my maid of honor, was the one who gave me the idea that changed everything. She said, Look, most of your family has your number and email. Why don't you send them a message directly explaining the situation and asking for them to confirm which event they're going to attend? That way at least you know what to expect and can adjust numbers for catering and all that. So, that's what I did. I sent a group message to my whole extended family, like 40 people, very calmly explaining that both my wedding and Arabella's baby shower were scheduled for the same date and time, that my wedding had been scheduled first, and invitations had been sent months in advance, that I understood it was a difficult situation, but I needed confirmations to finalize last-minute details, and that I hoped to count on their presence on one of the most important days of my life. The responses started coming in, and honestly, they surprised me, in a good way. Aunt Rachel obviously confirmed she would be at my wedding, and several of her children too. My cousins on my dad's side said they were also going to my wedding because they had received that invitation first and had already made plans. Some uncles I barely knew confirmed for the wedding, saying it was the right thing to do. And by the end of the day, only like 5 people said they were going to Arabella's baby shower, and 2 of those people were my parents. I received several private messages from relatives telling me they had always noticed the favoritism toward Arabella and that what she had done seemed terrible to them, that they supported me, that my wedding was going to be beautiful. Things like that honestly made me cry because I didn't know anyone else besides Aunt Rachel had seen what I lived through my whole life. Arabella, of course, found out about my group message and called me hysterical, screaming that I was trying to steal her special day, that I was manipulative, that I was turning the family against her, and I, with a calm I didn't know I had, told her she had created this situation by scheduling her baby shower on the same day as my wedding, knowing perfectly well when it was, and that the consequences of her actions weren't my responsibility. She kept screaming, but I simply hung up and blocked her everywhere. I didn't have the energy to keep dealing with her drama when my wedding was only days away, and I still had millions of things to do. The wedding day arrived and it was, apart from the incident I'm going to tell you about in a moment, absolutely perfect. The weather cooperated. The venue looked beautiful with all the fall decorations we had chosen. I looked amazing in my dress. Not to brag, but I seriously looked amazing. Ethan looked handsome and didn't stop crying during the whole ceremony. Our friends were there, his family was there, Aunt Rachel and most of my cousins were there, and the ceremony itself was perfect, emotional, everything we had dreamed of. We noticed my parents weren't there. Obviously, They had chosen Arabella's baby shower. And honestly, in the moment, it didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. Like, I was so happy and surrounded by people who really loved and supported me that their absence was sad but not devastating. The reception started amazing. The food was delicious. The DJ was playing perfect music. We had just done our first dance as husband and wife, and I was on a cloud of pure happiness when suddenly I see a commotion near the entrance to the ballroom. And there she was, Arabella, super pregnant in her elegant maternity dress, with my dad by her side, pushing her way through people like it was her event. My heart literally stopped. My stomach dropped to the floor. And all I could think was, no, 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 this can't be happening. She came straight to where Ethan and I were. Her eyes were red like she had been crying. And before I could say anything, she started talking very loudly, loud enough for many guests to hear. She started with how she couldn't believe I had excluded her from my wedding, that she was my sister, and this was unforgivable. And I interrupted her, saying she was perfectly invited and had chosen not to come. And she said, I had her baby shower today and I should have been more understanding. And this was in front of all our guests who obviously knew the whole story because I had told them. Zara came over immediately and told Arabella she needed to leave, that this wasn't the time or place. And Arabella completely ignored her and continued with her speech about how I had always been selfish and jealous of her. How I couldn't stand her getting attention. How I had ruined her baby shower by stealing the guests. My dad wasn't saying anything, just standing there looking at the floor like none of this had anything to do with him, and that somehow hurt more than everything Arabella was saying. Something in me broke at that moment, but not in a sad way, rather in a liberating way, like all the things I had kept inside for years came out at once. I told Arabella, loudly and clearly for everyone to hear, that she had scheduled her baby shower on the same day as my wedding on purpose, after having the date of my wedding months in advance, that she had tried to sabotage my special day because she couldn't stand something not being about her for once in her life, that I had lived 25 years being invisible to our family while she was adored for simply existing, and that I was no longer going to tolerate her toxic behavior. I told her she had chosen her baby shower over my wedding and now had the audacity to come to my reception to play victim, and that she needed to leave immediately, or I was going to call security to remove her. Arabella started crying in that dramatic way she always did when things didn't go her way. My dad finally reacted and started saying I was being disrespectful and cruel to my pregnant sister. And I told my dad he had been disrespectful and cruel to me my whole life by making me feel less than my sister at every opportunity he had. Several of my cousins and friends came over, forming like a barrier between them and us. Aunt Rachel literally took my dad by the arm and told him to leave. And the venue coordinator called security because this had already gotten out of control. Arabella kept screaming and crying, saying nobody loved her, that everyone was attacking her, and she finally left, escorted by security with my dad following all offended. The silence that followed was awkward for like 30 seconds, until one of Ethan's friends yelled, "Well, that was entertaining. Does anyone want more champagne?" And somehow that broke the tension, and people started laughing and talking, and the party continued. Ethan hugged me tight and asked me if I was okay, and honestly, I don't know what I felt at that moment. It was a mix of anger and relief and sadness and liberation all at the same time. But I told him yes, I was okay, and that we weren't going to let Arabella ruin our day. The rest of the reception was amazing. People danced, ate, had fun, and several guests came up during the night to tell me I had done the right thing confronting Arabella, that I had been brave, that they supported me. We went on our honeymoon a week later, to Japan, which was a destination we both wanted to visit, and we decided not to think about any family drama during those 2 weeks. When we got back, my mom had been calling and texting me asking to talk, and I finally answered, and she started with how we needed to fix things as a family, that what had happened at the wedding had been horrible but we were all to blame, and I stopped her right there. I told her no, we weren't all to blame, that Arabella had intentionally created this situation, and my parents had supported her by going to her baby shower instead of my wedding, and on top of that she had shown up at my reception to make a scene, and my mom hadn't defended me at any point through all of this. My mom started crying and saying she was in a difficult position, that we were both her daughters, and I told her that was precisely the problem, that for her we were both equal, but her actions throughout my life had shown that wasn't true, and that I couldn't keep pretending we had a functional mother-daughter relationship when clearly we didn't. I cut contact with my mom again, blocked my dad everywhere because he hadn't even tried to apologize, and decided I was only going to keep in touch with family members who genuinely cared about me, like Aunt Rachel, my cousins who came to the wedding, people who had shown me with their actions that they cared. About a month later, I get an unexpected visit from Brandon, Arabella's husband, and when I opened the door, he looked terrible, like unshaven, puffy eyes, and he asked if we could talk. I let him in because honestly I was curious, and he started apologizing for everything that had happened. Told me he didn't know Arabella had scheduled the baby shower on the same day as my wedding until it was too late, that when he found out he tried to convince her to change the date but she refused, and that he had wanted to attend my wedding but Arabella made a horrible scene. But the most interesting thing was that Brandon told me Arabella had lied to him, saying I hadn't invited her to the wedding, that was the reason she had done the baby shower that day, like, as revenge for my supposed slight, but that after the incident at the reception he had seen the invitations stored in Arabella's drawer and realized she had been invited and had lied about everything. He told me that had been the straw that broke the camel's back in a relationship that was already full of problems, that Arabella had proven to be manipulative and selfish, not just with me but in many aspects of her life, and that he was in the process of seeking a divorce. I was literally left with my mouth open. Didn't know what to say. And he continued telling me that Arabella had been calling him crying, saying it was all my fault, that I had destroyed her family, and that he just wanted me to know the truth about what had happened and that he was very sorry. I don't know how to feel about all this. Honestly, Brandon left after like an hour of conversation, where he basically told me the whole story of their marriage and how Arabella had always been the center of attention and how that had affected their relationship and their kids. And when he left, I just sat there trying to process everything. On one hand, I was satisfied knowing Arabella was finally facing real consequences for her actions, but on the other hand, I felt bad for her kids, who obviously aren't to blame for any of this, and are going to suffer because of their parents' divorce. Arabella has sent me messages from unknown numbers because I have her blocked, saying I ruined her life, that because of me her husband is leaving her, that all this is my revenge for being the less favored sister. And every message I read confirms that cutting contact was the right decision because she clearly has no capacity for introspection or recognizing her own responsibility in what happened. 3 months after all this, I'm in a much better place mentally than I've been in years. Maybe in my whole life. Ethan and I are happy in our marriage. My work is going amazing. I just got a promotion actually. And I've been going to therapy to process all the trauma from my childhood and the toxic family dynamics I grew up in. Aunt Rachel and I talk often. She tells me family gossip. Apparently, Arabella had her baby, and my parents are super involved helping her because Brandon moved out and is in the process of fighting for shared custody. Some family members have contacted me asking if I'm ever going to forgive Arabella and my parents. And honestly, I don't know the answer. Like, I don't feel hatred toward them, but I also don't feel any desire to have them in my life. You know what I mean? It's like I've finally closed that chapter and can breathe without carrying all that weight of feeling less than my sister. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if my parents had treated both daughters with the same love and respect, if Arabella hadn't grown up thinking the world revolved around her, if I hadn't spent my whole childhood and adolescence feeling invisible and inadequate. But then I realize all those experiences made me who I am now, gave me the strength to set boundaries, taught me to value people who genuinely care about me, and led me to Ethan and the life I have now. I wouldn't trade my present for anything, even if it means accepting all the pain of the past.